Hello friends, Jenkins here, bringing you another Dota 2 video on behalf of Dota Alchemy, and in this video we're going to be talking about the mid-game, and in particular, how your win conditions in the game should dictate your play in the mid-game of Dota. In general, in simple terms, the mid-game in Dota can be seen as having two states, a farming state and a fighting state. The farming state involves taking what resources you can off the map efficiently while stalling out the game and employing certain tactics to make sure that you're not losing too much for avoiding fights. In fact, you want to be gaining more than the enemy team is. The fighting state of the game involves looking for a good opportunity to actually fight your opponents, either in front of their objectives in order to end the game, or in front of your objectives in order that you can take control of the game. But understanding what the states are, or even being able to recognize what state a game is in, isn't even a fraction of the battle. The difficulty and skill involved with playing the mid-game well is the ability to decide what state is best for your team to play at the moment, and what the optimal way to play that state is between all 5 of the heroes on your team. So, first and foremost, how do we decide which state is best to play at the moment? This concept could probably be its own video, so this is going to be oversimplified for the purpose of brevity, but there are a few things that you need to look out for when deciding between farming or fighting in a game of Dota. Number 1, you need to look at their strengths, that is the enemy teams, their strengths of their draft, and the limits of their draft as well. So how do their heroes like to fight? Tidehunter, for example, he really likes these big 5v5 engagements, but he also has low on cooldown, so maybe you look to fight when his spells are on cooldown. Number 2, you need to look at the limits and strengths of your draft as well. How do your heroes like to fight? Nature's Prophet, for example, likes to TP to the back lines of fights that are uneven after splitting the enemies up by pushing across the map, but he doesn't really like these hard 5v5s unless he has a huge farm advantage. Number 3, you need to look at how fights have been going so far for you. What conditions have you been taking fights under before? Are you reacting to the enemy's movements, for example? If so, maybe that's not what you need to do if the fights are going shit. Maybe you need to think about taking fights in other ways. Number 4, what is your win condition? We'll go deeper into this later. Generally, in a game of Dota, there are a few ideal points at which you'd like to win the game, and it's typically based on a hero that peaks at a specific point during the game. Anyway, to get back to the point, once you've figured out what game state you want to play in a game, you need to decide how best to play it. For the farming game state, this once again goes back to the question of what is your win condition. Generally, there's a certain hero in a draft that your team picked that is going to be, or sometimes even has to be, the hero to close out the game. Of course, most of the time there are going to be multiple soft win conditions that are possible, and even multiple hard win conditions that are not only possible but very likely. But to keep things simple, we'll assume that there's one hero on your team that is your hard win condition. In other words, when that hero hits a certain timing, the enemy team simply cannot fight you, and you can win the game very easily from that point. For simplicity's sake, I want to focus on 3 main examples of very common win condition heroes, and it's mainly just because they are played so differently that I think it should give you a pretty good idea of potential win conditions in your games. So the 3 heroes I want to focus on are Terrorblade, Alchemist, and Broodmother. For Terrorblade, the way you want to play the game is to sit in the enemy jungle and farm, while pushing out the lane aggressively with illusions. The reason for this is because if you just hard farm your own jungle on Terrorblade past the laning stage, number 1, you simply aren't abusing the illusions as much as you can for no good reason, and number 2, you run the risk of having the enemy team take all of your towers and just end the game. So you can either essentially secure your own farm by being a nuisance in the adjacent lane in the enemy jungle with illusions, or make the game a lot harder for yourself. As a result of this playstyle, your team's game plan should revolve around securing the enemy safe lane tower in their jungle, either with wards or by fighting somewhere else on the map, so Terrorblade can farm and secure that area. For Alchemist, he wants to farm his own jungle. The difference between Alchemist and Terrorblade is that Alchemist doesn't have the greatest way to aggressively push lanes without putting himself in a killable position. But on the flip side, it's worth it to simply protect him in your own jungle while he farms, because he farms so quickly that he can have 5 items when the enemy carry has 2. That is, he becomes so strong in his timing that he doesn't really need to take towers, or even defend towers for that matter, because he'll be so strong that he's just unfightable. For this reason, your entire game plan for farming with Alchemist should be securing your own side of the map. For Broodmother mid, her strength is the fact that she can farm 3 ancient camps very quickly, flash farm a huge advantage, then end the game. As a result, you want to play around the fact that those ancients are important. In other words, you should deward ancients, you should fight around them if the enemy team is contesting them, or play away from the middle lane so Brood has space to farm ancients. It really depends on the game. In any case, the fact is, if you have a Broodmother mid based on how she likes to farm and how she's probably your win condition, you have to play around the fact that those ancients are the most important resource in the game. Essentially, it's important to note that it is completely different for every hero how you want to be farming, and it really just all depends on what your win condition is. In other words, in all 3 of these cases, these heroes would like to play the game in a certain way, and their team's play should essentially be doing whatever it takes to secure that playstyle for them. For the fighting game state, you once again have to think about your win condition and how they want to take a fight once they've hit whatever their timing is. For Terrorblade, he wants somebody else to start a fight, and then he shows up with Metamorphosis, maybe gets a couple of kills, but most importantly, he survives the fight, and he has Metamorphosis, so he takes a bunch of buildings. That is the ideal scenario for Terrorblade, and then at a certain point, you either rax off of that, or you go late enough where you can just run at buildings with a shitload of HP and just bait the Terrorblade himself. For Alchemist, he wants to safely farm a Radiance, Blink Dagger, and then maybe a Manta Style, and most importantly, he's level 15, so you get the talent, and then basically take any fight either by baiting the Alchemist with his ultimate, or by just having Alchemist jump in and act like a madman with his Blink. And with the speed at which Alchemist farms, it's actually very simple to know when you want to fight and how you want to fight. You basically just take any fight whatsoever as long as he has those items. The farming game state is very important for Alchemist, which makes a lot of sense. For Broodmother, she wants to farm ancients away from her team, basically only taking small skirmishes until she has a Diffusal plus BKB, and then you just 5-man with the Broodmother and then take any good-looking fight and then take objectives. In other words, Brood and Terrorblade sometimes fight with their team during their mainly farming periods, but they will still take these specific fights. Whereas Alchemist basically doesn't look to fight at all until he hits a huge timing, and then he just exclusively fights. It really just depends on what your important hero wants to do in the game and how they would like to win the game. To be honest, figuring out your win condition and thinking about how they like to play the game is enough to differentiate you from the vast majority of Dota players and win you a lot of games. Once again, it's important to note that even extremely skilled players make the wrong calls in how to play the game given a certain draft, and what's important is just that you're thinking about it at all, and that your thoughts on this matter are very malleable. If that is the case, then you will eventually get very good at understanding how to win the game. Of course, because patches come out a lot, it's even more so important that your thoughts are malleable on this matter, because, you know, Terrorblade will play one way in a certain patch, but maybe not in a future patch. A little bit of a side note is that if you're thinking a lot about this concept, then a lot of other things are going to come together for you as well, because all of these concepts in Dota are based on one another. For example, you'll understand how to play the lanes a little bit better, or make a good lane rotation if you understand how you're going to want to play the mid game based on your win condition hero. Anyway, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I hope to see you guys in another video.